Bionicle peaked in 2004. Sort of. Let me explain. Bionicle was a series from LEGO, as you guys all know if you're watching this channel, that came out back in 2001 with the Toa Metru sets, the Turaga, eventually the McDonald's Matoran, and also the Rahi. If you're looking at the canister sets, these Toa Metru would essentially pave the way for every canister set to come after them, but they were fairly limited. I will argue that, in my personal opinion, the Toa Metru are still contenders. They are fantastic sets, both aesthetically and in terms of just form and function. They insinuate certain things with the design of their parts, even though their elbows don't bend, their knees don't bend, their hips are pretty lackluster to say the least, and of course their heads don't move. They do a lot right. Of course, 2004 would bring us the Toa Metru, which was basically an evolution in every direction on the original Toa Metru, with one glaring issue, and that may be the absence of true shoulder joints. Preserving that gear function at the shoulders meant moving the arm joint down to where the elbow naturally would be. Essentially, the Toa Metru have the same amount of articulation in their arms as many of the Toa Metru. They just look cleaner, look better, feel better because of where that joint is located. I'm going to show you real quick the Nuju set here, which has had a change in these corners here. I show Nuju in this video because he is my personal favorite of the Toa Metru colors and characters in general. Toa Metru obviously introduced us to the darker color schemes, which I think were great in 2004 and then really wore out their welcome as time went on. But Nuju here stands out, and I think he's a great character overall. The main issue I have with 2004 as a whole, with 2005 especially, because I think it is compounded in 2005, is the color scheme and sort of the lack of, let's say, creativity. Here's the thing. The Toa Metru, I think, are very good, but they're a little more similar than the Toa Nuva, who were a little more similar than the Toa Metru. The Toa Metru, one of their main strengths, that came out weird. One of their main strengths is the fact that they're not using that many different parts, but they're visually quite distinct. The Toa Metru, however, opt to add a secondary color of gray rather than anything else. And this is clearly a attempt to save on budget, right? It just makes sense. The Toa Metru introduce a lot of new pieces: the body, the chest cover, the hips, the knee pad, the leg, the foot, the shoulder pad, the arm, the weapons for each individual character, the head, the eye stalk, and of course the mask. And surely I forgot something, but that's a lot. That is a lot of new molds to make. And so LEGO very clearly, as mentioned, saved parts, saved budget by just basically giving them the same parts. But in so doing, they have a lot less to differentiate them. Yes, some of them are different heights thanks to the placement of their hips and or necks, but it's still a little odd. The reason I bring this up at all is because I don't know what argument that I could make to tell you what year of Bionicle is my favorite. Nostalgia absolutely drives my love for classic Bionicle, but I think I also admire that restricted creativity. Bionicle in 2001 wasn't a thing. I mean, it was, of course, but they didn't have a lot of new parts to play with. And so when LEGO ran into a corner, they built their way out of it with creativity, with limited parts. And there's something really special about that. The fact that the original Rahi, for all their faults, are essentially just Technic beams slapped together in the shape of some vaguely recognizable animal is honestly incredible. And the fact that it does such a good job of being what it is while incorporating a function and still looking like something both recognizable and unique. You know, tigers and bulls with treads for legs, which is clearly an attempt, at the very least, for LEGO to save on parts, right? What does a set like the Kane-Ra need legs for if the legs don't serve any purpose in that set? It doesn't, so why include them? That set has a lot of parts already. 2001 introduces a lot of fantastic creatures, characters, builds, and functions specifically, as I mentioned, paving the way for a lot of what Bionicle would become. 2002 only builds on this, in my opinion. Though we get less Rahi overall, if you don't look at the Master Builder set for a moment, we get the Exo-Toa, the Barag, and the Boxer sets, all of which have incredible functions, and each of which looks maybe even more succinct than their predecessors. The Rahi almost celebrate their hollow nature, and I mean that in the best possible way. But the Exo-Toa is honestly brilliantly engineered. For the sake of not having knees, it is an incredible build, given how it looks, how it achieves that aesthetic, how parts angle in very specific ways so as to lock together but still allowing a character to sit positioned inside, not to, dwell on our unfortunate Pohatu and his upside down body situation. 2003 is interesting because it does bring a couple of Rahi back, notably some Rahi that are important to the Bionicle Mask of Light movie that came out in 2003 as well. Clearly, these Rahi maybe were shoehorned into the movie or shoehorned into these box sets. It's hard to say which came first, but I'm very thankful for both. Because the Puku and Takua set, for example, has honestly one of my favorite functions, and it's not a function geared for battling at all. Because at this point, Bionicle wasn't really about the mask game. Like, yes, that still made sense, but Puku didn't need something like that. The Gaku bird didn't need something like that. They just functioned for the sake of having functions, and I admire that. And they still look good doing it. 2004 is where things get interesting for me, because 2004 would give us 3 major creatures, and then also the Licon and Kikanalo set. Now, Kikanalo himself does not have any sort of function, so we're going to ignore him for a minute, even though I think he is a good build overall. Instead, I'm going to focus a bit on the Nivok, the Kreka set, and the Nidiki set. I remember getting all 3 of these sets back in 2004 within a pretty short time span. I don't remember which one I got first. And immediately to me, it became clear that something was going in a different direction. Outside of just these new colors I was unfamiliar with, and quite thankful that these sets build upon, the functions, at least in Nidiki and in the Nivok set, in some ways feel forced. What do I mean by that? Well, Nidiki has the ability to fold his legs up, but why? Maybe there's some story significance, that's sure, and I know you could fold him down and maybe slide him back into the box or whatever. Bionicle had a very big thing about being able to be taken apart and stored back in their original containers. That's all fine. But what importance does it play? I always found it quite odd. It didn't feel satisfying to me in the same way as something like the Exo-Toa, which had its functions serve the purpose of fitting a character, right? It's things that didn't quite make sense upon first use, like why do these little knee flaps fold down? Are they some sort of mechanical thing? Are you opening them up to repair this giant beast? You can. You're a kid. You get to make up the story. But these legs on this Nidiki set were always weird to me because they just felt shoehorned in. Now, I'm thankful that they exist. Again, it does teach you a little bit about these elastic axles, right? And so I think that overall I'm happy to have them, but they are strange. They do stand out from anything else we got. Nivok, very similarly, though I think a little bit better since it is a bird set, and one of those functions at the very least opens its wings. Now, these wings can't flap, which I think is a missed opportunity, and I don't think it would be terribly difficult to add a function like that in there. The second function on Nivok, of course, is the fact that the chest can open. In this case, these elastic pieces essentially just act as rubber bands, and that's fine. It's a cool use of those parts. They look good, technically speaking. They look very aesthetically pleasing. I think it works, but it is still a little strange, and it feels like a watered-down version of what the Exo-Toa tried to give us before. Still cool. I appreciate it. Kreka is an interesting beast all on his own, of course. But the reason I say 2004 is where Bionicle peaked specifically deals with the functionality and the form balanced in these Toa sets. I think if there is something about Bionicle that draws you in, 2004 has the most to offer, at least in the canister sets. Each character individually looks great. I will say, as a group, they start to lose points just for the sake of that lack of individuality. Is that how you say that? But as a single individual set, I don't think you can go wrong with any single one. 2005 to me is where Bionicle starts to go downhill in its lack of focus on what it wants functions to be. I feel like LEGO painted themselves into a corner that I've been in myself without ever really realizing it when I was there. For a long time, and I've said this, I've wanted to build Rahi, right? Animals with functions, or without functions for that matter. I never said they all need to have them, but many of mine do. I would say well over 50% at this point. And how do you come up with functions for 200 Rahi? You don't. You come up with functions for 10, 15, 20, and then you think of different ways to implement them or where they make sense. That's what I've done. I've started to realize that it's not about using a function one time. It's where can you make it work differently or work in a new way. For example, I have 2 dragonfly builds that I love. I have more than 2 of them, but 2 very specific ones that stand out in my mind right now. One of these dragonfly builds has wings connected to a sliding mechanism. It's one of my earliest Rahi that I've ever designed. And this sliding mechanism opens all 4 wings up. They don't flap, they don't do anything else, they just open and close. Fairly simple. But it looks incredible, and it is such a smooth function. But clearly, that's not all that a dragonfly can do. In fact, many dragonflies don't even bother to fold their wings closed. They usually keep them open. And so I have another dragonfly build, which I've actually adapted recently, which has a very simple mechanism. In fact, it is the one used on the Ornithopter currently. The mechanism that just turns the wings back and forth. And what I love about this version is that this is a very simple to understand concept, just moving a cam between 2 wings, getting those wings to move. And it's scalable, right? Each of these functions serves a very different purpose, but it does a similar thing. And that's what I enjoy about all of this. It seems like LEGO in 2005 forgot what functions are, what the purpose of them is. The Hordika are weird. They can bicep curl with one strong arm. I guess the other arm is limp. Like, what's going on there? I don't get it. I understand that they needed to have room inside of the central body for the ripcord, for the Ratuka spinner to go through it. But at that point, is it worth sacrificing the build for that one launcher? Or could you not rotate the launcher sideways and have the attachment point face sideways so the ripcord goes the opposite direction and thus preserves the torso for a function of some other kind? That to me makes more sense. Even if it was a function where the arms move like this, which would make no sense, but at least would be something different, something unique, and I think better than a bicep curl. But we also get the Vizrak, which I think are better, arguably. Granted, their functions are a bit, let's say, specific, if that makes sense. You pretty much have to use Vizrak claws or pinchers with the Vizrak shells, right? Because the 2 pieces are designed to work together. Surely you can do it other ways, of course, but I do always find that fascinating because it's not gears doing the work. Now, I still love the Vizrak. They hold a very special place in my heart. I think they were honestly kind of the shining light of 2004, 2005. Mostly, if not for anything, the colors making a return. But 2005 also gave us 3 more Titans. With Sidorak, Rudaka. I'm bad at these, see, because I never got the 2005 Titans when I was a kid. And Kitangu. Mostly didn't get them just because I didn't know that they were a thing. For some reason, they completely slipped my mind. But all 3 of these, to me, are a bit lacking. I will say that Kitangu is probably the best of the 3 in terms of functionality, just for the sake of that chest opening function. Again, very similar, and as I mentioned, taking ideas from something that they had done previously with the Exo Toa set, but this time incorporating it into a lock mechanism that unveils that Rotuka spinner. Now, it's very easy to make that Rotuka spinner just fall off when you use the function, but I digress. It's still very nice to have it at the very least, and it's cool that he comes with an exclusive Rotuka as well, if that's the collectible of 2005, I guess. Masks were a thing no longer. But Sidorak is an interesting one because of those shoulder connections, right? The fact that he has those large gears in the shoulders that can move, but they don't serve much of a purpose. I can appreciate the effort, at the very least, to do something different, to have that kind of function. It's a function that's very popular on a lot of other types of action figures, but I think the main issue with Sidorak is that he's so much larger that it's cumbersome. It's clunky to use a function like that because those gears are so far apart, especially for kids who have small hands, typically. And then for Rudaka, her function is, I guess, the spinning claws on her hand, but Katangu also features that function too with his shield, so it's not as much fun, and the idea is that you're supposed to be able to grab Rotuka out of the air with it, but like, good luck. It's a weird function. Again, I can appreciate it for being something different, but it's very clearly forced in this case. 2006 would obviously change things for Bionicle pretty much for the rest of its duration, and though 2008 would start to bring back some functions, it would relegate them to the vehicle sets, which is at least something. 2007 kind of did this as well with the Lissovic and his Sea Sled vehicle, so at least we got something these next few years, but overall, there wasn't much else to see in the way of functions because Bionicle became a different thing in late 2005 and onward. I would argue in 2004 as well. To me, at the time, as a kid, 2004, the dark colors felt like experimentation. But by 2005, I realized they were a reflection of the darker tone of Bionicle that my youth didn't know. Going into what Bionicle was as a kid, it was bright, it was vibrant, it was boisterous, and it was this new place that I wanted to be. I'd never even left this country before, still haven't, and yet I felt like I was on this island. I'm landlocked where I am, you know? But this pulled me in. Metru Nui couldn't do that for me. It was a city environment. It wasn't something as foreign to me because I've lived at least near a city for part of my life. So I've seen those things. I've never been to a tropical island, but I've been to a city plenty of times. And it's more ambiguous, if that makes sense. When I went on adventures as a kid, I went to the woods and the creeks and the playgrounds and things, not to cities. And so cities always felt foreign. Because when I was there, it was with who? Parents, I guess? And they set the rules for you. You're not as free as you are when you're running through the woods as a kid, you know, or playing in your backyard, creating things with your mind. An island is a place you choose to be. A city is a place you choose to avoid. That's at least what it felt like to me as a kid. And so this futuristic vibe that I guess Bionicle was going for back then just never stuck to me. And so I always imagined that although Metru Nui existed, it was still this island kind of like Motunui. I mean, it was the same footprint. You can't argue with that. But something about it never resonated with me. Maybe it was in part not having the Imnog games, though I never played those as a kid, so it couldn't have been that. Maybe it was the lack of the CDs coming with the characters, and so I didn't get to see as much of this stuff on the limited internet access and computer that I did have. I can't exactly tell you what it was. 2004 did one thing very well, and it was the design of the characters, but it was one design. 2001, however, though having one design, worked well outside of its boundaries, giving us different types of arms, different lengths of arms, asymmetries, characters with just one weapon instead of two, and characters with bodies that were upside down or necks attached to weird places. Like, it's so different, you know? And I think that's the other thing that I appreciate about 2001 is that they didn't feel human. The argument that I can make for 2004 is this feels more like a human proportioned character, maybe not perfectly by any means. And of course, Nuju is the tallest, arguably, but it's less robotic, which is weird because I mean, clearly it's a robot, right? But it didn't feel that way. It lost something in its transition between these two places, between this brighter, child-friendly color scheme, this grittier teenage feel. Maybe it was aging with its fan base, I don't know, but not to me, I guess. Anyway, that's just me, though, and I can't speak for everybody. So if you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out a lot. And of course, as always, you can check out the Discord, Instagram, or Patreon if you want to support the channel. Get some perks in the description below and join the conversation in the comments. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.